one day, we left like 6 in the morning, and we drove down to the US. And we did the tours, you know, went to some bars and some
I think it's time to start up. I'm Phil Peterson, a member of the board for the Historical Society and editor of the Antiquarian, the newsletter. And I have the privilege of introducing you to this evening's activities. And you probably saw the Antiquarian in the last issue that we mailed out. You remember that we presented the evolution of bricks and mortar of the school system and timed it with the referendum, which we were happy to see succeeded. And we thought it would be very interesting to have Norm Toensing talk about a project. How often do you see a project that takes 8 years and 200 students to complete? It's so unique and so different that there's lots to learn about it. And that's what Norm Toensing is going to tell us about tonight. Norm's been with the school system here for 30 years, and he's also a member of the board of the St. Croix Falls Historical Society. So I'll let him fill you in on the rest.
Well, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay with this sound system? It is kind of good that we did hire a policeman for crowd control. So that's working out. We have more people. The crowd is building. Indeed. I have some people to thank. Mark Barant, our superintendent, is here tonight. And I thank him for allowing us to have this space and time to do what we're going to do, what I'm going to do. I also want to thank Peggy Ryan, who enabled me to meet Jeremiah, who is our cameraman tonight, a student, senior this year, going on to Eau Claire, University of Wisconsin to Eau Claire next year. So thank you for that, Jeremy. I also wanted to thank Melissa Ward, who put some stuff on Facebook, as I think others did too. Rick Younger, who furnished the scaffolding for this job that we kept all the time and had to reconstruct, and every year I had to give a safety lesson to the students on how high, not to climb that high and hang from that particular rafter. I also want to thank Kelly Anderson, who put this together, arranged for this podium and everything. So I have to say that those are the people I want to thank. This starts out really with Monty Fay, who was the then principal of the high school, came to me one day and he said, "Norm, we should do something with this wall." And we came out and looked at the space, and we decided that we would put something there. We didn't know what it was, so I ran it by the senior students of what they might have for ideas. So we have to think about what could have been here. Well, one of our students said, "Why don't we do Star Wars?" You'd be looking at blues and oranges and yellows and reds. Or another one of our students, Tony Hansen, who had a lot of mischief in him, said, "Why don't we do The Naked Man by Leonardo da Vinci within a circle and a square?" I said, "Tony, this is a high school." So we didn't do that. Now, one of the courses that I took in college, and it was a check in the block kind of course, was called School and Community. And I studied at Winona State University, which at that time was called Winona State Teachers College. And I studied under a lady there, Professor Floretta Murray. And Floretta Murray, I learned, had been such a mentor to me. I had to put in about 10 or 15 years to look back to know what a great influence she'd been on me. Well, one of the things that I did after I had retired from here is the open document law had been passed, so I thought I would look at my recommendations that I gotten in college and from other jobs that I held. So I looked at the one that she had written, and she said, Norman will always have difficulty accepting authority. And I thought, I don't know how I ever got a job with that guy. Well, she went on to balance it with some other stuff, but I thought I had forgiven her that because I looked back at it, and this would not be here if Loretta Murray had not been an influence on me. So I want to give credit to that. Now, I read this, my cat loves this, by the way. These plaques, which have 168 names on them, really should have 200. But in the beginning of the planning stage, I didn't realize that it would take on a life of its own. So I did not chronicle the early names, but there should be close to 200 people on those plaques. One of the plaque names missing is Mitch McQuaid. And he was very active, and I just missed it. But he did this very complex buggy, including the padded seats. So I wanted to honor Mitch McQuaid for posterity in making this video. Now the color scheme was arrived at by taking color samples and matching it to the brick color. So what we're looking at is a monochromatic color scheme, meaning one color. The size of this is about the size of the Last Supper. Now I don't compare it in any other way except that it uses the same perspective. And that means that this is an example of one-point parallel perspective. And as I mentioned, the Last Supper, you see that in your mind's eye. And what that means is that in that kind of perspective, the vanishing point, which is right here, this guy riding down the horse, is Christ's head. He's not Christ's head, but that's our vanishing point. In this perspective, the horizon line rides on that point back and forth. So that's the kind of perspective that we will be looking at. The size is comparable to the Last Supper. Someone asked me, one of my students asked me, how long did it take to do the Last Supper? I said, I don't know, but I think about 2 years. And he had probably a couple of assistants. And then the kid said, how come it took us so long to do ours? Well, you should remember that this was done within a class period, usually of more advanced students. And by the time we get out here with the equipment and the stuff to do, we're talking a meaningful time frame of maybe 40 minutes. So when we say 8 years, it's deceiving. We weren't out here for the total of 8 years painting on this mural. So I wanted to put that in perspective. Well, I never knew how to do a mural, so I had to think about it. And what we did is we found a 1948 photo that had the correct perspective. So we withdrew that picture and made a copy of it and imposed an inch grid system on it. We then came to the wall, and using the same format of size, we took a carpenter's snap line to create the grid system on the wall, except a lot larger, from 1-inch squares to 2-foot squares, so that we could transpose what we were going to do onto the wall with that grid system. So the layout became really important. Once that grid system was on, we studied plat maps of what had been in town, what buildings had been here. And through the generous contribution of Duran Blanding, giving us a lot of old photos, we were able to study the buildings that were here with the plat map and the old photos and eliminate the ones that wouldn't be there. At that stage then, imposed on that grid, we put those block form that where a building would be in colored markers, all kinds of colors. Just a square that, or space that would accommodate that building that would eventually go there. Now, a lot of people come into the building and they think kids just want to start painting. But there was a lot of prep that went into before we ever touched the paint. The paint was based on 3 colors, dark, medium, and light. And it was from those 3 colors that we derived probably 50 to 60 variations of those 3 colors. How did we know that? How to do that? We made names for every color. We made color charts with splotches of that color. We named them Albert, Mabel, Tony, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, all that. So as they began to work on this using and consistent with the color scheme, they would call for a color, give me number 17, so they could resume what they had done yesterday with the same color. And we had a cart full of little containers of those colors. So, and we had to constantly, we used latex paint, which is water soluble, so that we could clean up easily. I went and bought the very best quality of latex paint available at that time. And while there's a couple of condition problems here, this has held up very well for over 21 years now. Not to mention the 8 years it took to do it. So once we got those blocks up on the wall to illustrate a particular shape right here, let's say, they would take butcher block paper and simulate the point on the floor by using a long length of metal flat iron, and it would simulate the point on the floor so they could draw the building and make all the mistakes they wanted to there, and my job was to see that they understood that it had to be done correctly. Once it was done to my satisfaction, they would carve in the back side of that butcher block paper, put it back up on the wall, tape it, and redraw it where we'd have this simulated detailing here. One of the things that had to be done well is called incremental closure. That means that in this perspective, each one of these gets narrower. Well, on a butcher block paper, we could draw it and redraw it and get it right, and then carve it and put it up there, and we know then that it was correct. Then it's ready to receive the paint. Well, how do we know who can do what? This is not unlike fielding a team or being a choir director. I told my students that this is not unlike a choir in the sense that almost everyone can sing, but there are very few soloists. And I would tell them the soloists are going to help me teach you, but we'll all have something to do. So as a result, we worked in teams, usually 2, sometimes 3, but then a soloist would be what they call a floater, what I call a floater. And they would be able to do some of the more detailed work. For example, one of those floaters, or soloists, was Justin Kufal, who did this bike under the stairs. And remember, each of these stairs go to the point. Again, that's pre-drawn before it is ever put on the wall. These plaques from back there, in the middle of this space, appear to be windows, and they're unobtrusive, and they're meant to be that way. The whole thing was sightlined from just as you enter the cafeteria, and so that's what we decided what the top would be like, where we conclude the mural's parameters. So that's kind of what happened there. The other thing that Monty Fay had suggested that we do, and how this particular subject came to fruition, was he said, why don't you go over across Highway 8 and take a look at this whole of the St. Croix Valley. So I took my senior students up there and we looked down onto the valley. And I said to the students, so what do you see here? All we see is trees, they said to me. And it was true, we just saw trees and trees and trees. Once in a while, maybe a steeple poking up. It was not a good subject to do. We would have had just a whole maze of trees here. So when we came back, we invited Mr. Fay into the classroom, and the students then said, all we saw was trees. Well, my job as a teacher was to try to steer them into thinking not just of the trees, but of our town, of our community. And while I like to think it's their idea and they did too, I think I kind of steered them into this subject as you see it now, as opposed to just a bunch of trees or Star Wars or a naked man. So let's take a walk down the street here on this side. This was a bank building. It is now a bar, which is undergoing some real strenuous renovation. I don't know what they're going to do there. But this was originally a brick building. And we took artistic liberty in doing this mural. For example, there were no streetlights there. There was no hydrant there. And we didn't have a dog thinking about the hydrant. But the building is done meticulously with bricks. And if you come up later and look at this more closely, this was not an enviable job to do. This was not done by soloists. This was done by the choir members that didn't exactly enjoy doing the bricks. But anyway, this was probably done with down rock brick, which is a product locally. And then, of course, the Baker Building, which was originally called a Cushing Land Agency, and then Major Baker took it over, it became Baker Land and Title Company. Now, I have particular ownership in this building because I myself physically painted that building downtown. I didn't paint this one, but I painted the one downtown. We now have since had it painted by a professional painter. So walking down the street, this is another example here done by Keith Snell of incremental closure. He would come in on his study halls, climb the scaffolding, and begin painting these very intricate, well done incremental closure awnings. Again, I mentioned Mitch McQuaid, and a partner of his did this very intricate work. And here is the Vincent House Hotel. And the title is here, and this involves foreshortening. So the student had to learn about shrinking those letters to be faithful to the perspective, again to the point. These lines go to the point. And it says Vincent House. What I tried to have them learn here was that you don't have to put a line here. Your mind puts in that space that is the same color as the wall. So this was a thing to teach them about detail that really isn't there, that the viewer's mind puts that line there. And if you study that a little more closely, you'll see what I mean by that. A little foliage that we did have that denotes the backdrop of our community is here, and they practiced that on a side panel just to learn how to do foliage. So that became important to suggest that detail. Again, this being a monochromatic color scheme, this could infer that it's fall. Actually, it's not, the other thing that tells us what time of year, this airplane, again, we took some license there. This would have been 1912. It'd be a little newer than that. But it's carrying a thing advertising the Polk County Fair. So this would have put the time in August of 1912. Sometimes when someone would be a soloist, they would own that particular piece. For example, this car was done by Tim Tabbitt, and he did a really good job on that, and he had to understand about the foreshortening of the car. As we march down the street, here's a beer sign, Schmidt's beer sign. I told the students that did that, this is when you don't ask permission to do a beer sign in a high school. This is when we just simply do it. So if we'd gone to the school board or to the officials and said, can we do a beer sign, they would have to be compelled to say, no, you can't do that, this is a high school. So we didn't ask them, and there it is. Well, it's historically accurate because Schmidt's Brewery was in St. Paul, and this is probably one of the distant distributorships of their product. So that's probably what happened there. So we kept it, and they enjoyed doing it, by the way. There is something I want to tell you about being out here. This was always noisy, but it was good noise. It was people asking for paint numbers, it was people with the clank of the metal on the floor to simulate the point. It was good noise. Mark Brandt and I walked through there on noon one day, and it was very noisy, and the kids were having a good time at their lunch hour, and we both agreed, this is good noise, this is healthy noise, this is what we should be having. So I think it was always a pleasant thing for a kid to work on this mural. We never had any, you over there get to work. We didn't have to have that kind of a climate. So I think they liked coming out here. It was kind of a liberation from the classroom. I think they felt a little freer out here. They loved the scaffold to jump up and down on that. I really worried about that, but we got through, because particularly in the high work here, that was a chancy thing to have. I was going to tell you about the other side of this mural has a bird shadow, and that belongs to Bink Ward. Bink Ward worked for the school district, and he was sitting looking at us working on the mural, and he said, you know, that shadow needs a bird, so we dedicate that bird to Bink. Well, let's keep going down this side of the street. Thompson Grocery Store is down here. One of our students was doing this aspect of it, which entails closer detail than this illustrates from back here. And she was not acknowledging the fact that it had to be, again, incrementally closed. It had to get continuously narrower as it got closer to the point. Well, it was partially my fault, and I missed that, and my job was to supervise and say, and I did say to her, you know what, we have to do this again. And she wasn't happy about it, but we had to do what we had to do. So I think she felt better about doing it right. Once in a while, we would have someone do something on the mural that wasn't satisfactory. And we would leave that alone for a couple of months, and I'd assign another student to redo it, not letting the other student know that they had failed at it, because there was a dignity issue there. They wanted to feel pride, and no one ever caught on. We didn't have to do that very often, but once in a while, if something didn't meet the satisfaction of not only me, but of the students, we would have to do it over. I think that was important for everybody to feel good about this whole thing, instead of, gee, I really screwed up that part of the mural, it's my fault. We didn't have any of that going on. Continuing down the street is a Taingen's drugstore. Again, these lights get smaller and smaller. It takes us pretty far down the street. Here's Taingen's Drug, and then beyond that. And I don't remember what some of these buildings are, but on the plat maps it would tell us what they were. But even the most distant building became as important as the more prominent ones that are in the foreground. Well, let's go to the other side of the street. Again, this was Blanding's law office. It's now Swanson's law office. I'm not sure what this building is right now, but these, again, march down the street. Again, because this is America, this is our community, important that we celebrate America, so we clearly have to put an American flag. Here's a kid riding a bicycle that's heading toward this very crabby-looking man. And the crabby-looking man is carrying a newspaper, and on the newspaper is printed Titanic. Going back to this part here, here's a little kitten on a step, and he's looking out straight ahead of the doorway, and there's a mouse here. The mouse doesn't see the cat, and the cat doesn't see the mouse. But you can see them both when you go up there and look at it more closely. So, here's the fat banker up here. And here's the clock. Now, there wasn't a clock here. We placed the time at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the way that's confirmed is that the cast shadows from the buildings and from the vehicles endorse that. This tells us the time of year, This tells us the time of day. And as we look up the street and we see this buggy, which was done by, I have the name of him here, Sean Stelton did this, and the bicyclists, are important things to see on the street. There are vehicles, there are people. These lines are like arrest lines, and they're placed so that you as a viewer, when you look at this, you are stopped in looking at the totality of the street by these stop lines, and they in turn direct your eye to the other vehicles and buggies on the street itself. So while it looks like it's hot, because this would have been a dirt road back in 1912, it is a device to calm down the view of the mural. The clouds, again, are very subtle. They're meant to be unobtrusive, yet they complement. The whole structure here, the whole mural, is meant to complement the space rather than compete with it. So the reason for the polarization is, again, to have a blend where you're comfortable looking at it. Some people come in here and they don't even notice it. And why? Because it's so unobtrusive, it doesn't shout at you. As we were doing it, some of the students would say, how come the sky is not blue? Well, because it simulated a tintype of the Euro, and that's why it's colored this way. This opening to the middle school, I like to think I had something to do with this. I sat on the planning committee for the middle school, which was built after this building was built. And my thought was then, and remains always, that addition to anything ought to look like it isn't one. So the opening that the architects decided on would have concluded right here. It would have taken 4 feet off of the mural on that side. Well, because I sat on that committee, I was able to say, well, why don't they were holding that mural too sacred? I said, why don't you do that so that we have a more ample opening toward a transition from the middle school to the high school? Well, right beyond that is the library, and the library doors, it would have been one door at a right angle as you walk down that narrow hallway. So when this was opened up, it opened up the space where the doorway to the library is a double door, and it invites the high school to know that it's their library too. It's not just the library to the middle school. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the woodworking here. The kids in the shop class did that under the direction of John Cavalin. John Cavalin was an excellent shop teacher, and he picked the right people, the soloists from his department, to do this wainscoting. And they did a wonderful job, and also to create the transition between the opening and the mural. So this was a very important part. And this doorway, Darlene, my wife Darlene and I went to the Twin Cities to look at warehouses, 3 warehouses that held more than 5,000 doors. Well, we obviously could look at a lot of these doors and say, well, that's not a good fit. But we finally found the door that had been what was called a pocket door. It meant it slid into the wall, and it was in relatively good condition. But again, John Cavalin and Mary Jo, his wife, who are both excellent craftspeople, redid that door. And the significance of that now is that formerly the opening was done with a kind of a generic school door. This now is a work of art, and it blends with the time period of 1912. It also has significance in that it goes from this past that this denotes into the Distance Learning Center as part of the library. So it's like going from the past to the future, and I think that has significance too. I was a young teacher in Spring Valley, Minnesota, and I worked with a guy, a science teacher there. I'm going to not use his real name. I'm going to call him Mr. Smith. And what students would say about Mr. Smith was that he is so smart, I didn't understand anything he said. Well, what is a teacher? A teacher is someone that imparts what they know to those that do not. And that's what I hope that this wall is testament to, that what I was able to learn, I was able to impart to the students. What do we expect from students? We have a really, really fine music program here in our school system. Why? Because those directors expect great things from those kids. And you know what? They give them what they want. If you don't want much from them, they're not going to give you much. If you want a lot from them, they'll give you a lot. And I think that's what they did here too. And while I like to think I controlled the quality of the work initially, once it was started, the students themselves were very careful about keeping that quality. They knew they were making it work for posterity. So that's really important. It's kind of like be there for everybody. So we have a whole spectrum of colors, and we have a whole spectrum of abilities. And sometimes we would pair people, and I would think about who can do this, who can I put with that person. Sometimes I might put somebody with high ability with someone with more modest abilities. Again, to keep the dignity issue afloat for them. So we had a real input of very competent people that were mindful of quality. I had an experience here where the day came that I got a call from one of my former students who told me they just had a baby boy. And I said, well, that's nice. And he said, we call him Norman. I said, well, that's my name. He says, I know, we named him after you. I said, I don't even name my own children after me. Well, anyway, Norman, when anybody gets somebody named after you, kind of want to know what's happening to them. So he went to school in Osceola, and I would meet staff down there for different meetings, and I'd say, how's Norman doing? Oh, he's a good little boy. He seems to be, I was kind of happy to hear that. And so as time went on, he got to be a junior in high school. And he came to this school, transferred here, and he was introduced to me. And I said, I've heard of you. And he said, I've heard of you too, because he knew he was named after me. Well, he fit in just beautifully. First of all, he was a good-looking kid. He was a good athlete. He was good with computers. He was just a study of what you want in anybody. So I was very proud of him. And the kids here liked him too. And of course, he'd be working on the wall, and they'd say, hey, Norm, and I think they were talking to me. But he fit in very, very well. But one of the things that we didn't have, and I didn't want to do it, I wanted this to be done 99.9% by students, was portrait artists. I could do them, but I didn't want to. I wanted to find someone that could do them. I couldn't think of anybody. It turned out to be Norman that did all the portraits on this mural. He went on to college. He went on to earn a master's degree. He's not a bank robber. He's not a rapist. I'm really pleased about that. So that's what he's doing. Now, some people would think that this would be the highlight of my life. Well, my family is the highlight of my life. But this comes a pretty close second. So, what I'd like to do now is if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to ask them. I'll try to feel what you ask me. Yeah, Sue.
How did you know when you were done? When you had the last detail?
I retired.
Oh.
Well, we did plan it by the year, and every year we would video once it was underway. The video is available under my name on Facebook. I have reviewed it, and it is done very, very poorly. It was done by students, but it is so bad that it's good. And the kids are fooling around and having a good time, and again, the noise out here is a factor. It's a production thing. So in reviewing it, I decided that Yeah, that's not a bad reference for you to go to if you have a chance and see what it was like to see how it was done. Well, every year we would introduce a line of kids up in front of the wall there of what they had done that year. So that is available for posterity as well. And it might be fun. I'm going to review it again when I go home, not tonight, but another night, and reflect on some of the people. The people that did it are now in their late 30s or even early 40s. And so that's kind of the story of how we knew when we got done. I was running out of time. That didn't put a rush on it, just kind of worked out that way that the students had done a good job. I very rarely touch this. I did touch it once in a while. And I also had Monty Fay touch it. I have to give credit where it's due. It wouldn't be here without his advising that we do something with this wall. So one day he was walking through there and we were having street painters do the street. So I handed him a little tiny brush and gave him a little paint, and he owns that little hunk of street right there that acknowledged, so his name is on the plaque as well. Yes?
Do you have anything to protect it in the city?
We entertained that thought of putting some kind of a sealant on this to protect it. But if someone is bent on defacing any work of art, they would get through that, and then it would be more difficult to get through to the real pigments. So no, we did not do that. And I'm happy to tell you, while there's a couple condition issues that are very minor, no one has ever defaced this. I used to tell the students that it's not unlike what Michelangelo said. There are some men that are created to be simply funnels for food. And it's that 5% of any population that we have to worry about. 95% of our students here don't do that kind of stuff and never have. But there is always an element. But I think because somebody had a cousin, an uncle, an aunt, a sister, a brother that probably participated in making this creation, that still holds some strength of not defacing this piece of work.
I was really thinking more about painting. Why was the
I'm sorry, John, I didn't hear.
I said I was more interested in checking it. Does do you think the colors fade?
Well, this is shielded. It really isn't like an outdoor mural, which particularly facing south, if it were on an exterior, would be a problem. But this is on an interior. It's lit in this recessed area, and I see every light is on. And thank you, Mark. And so as the night goes on, it gets darker in here. This becomes really even more dramatic. In fact, it's even probably a safety thing because looking from the outside in, you can see this lit at night, and anybody that's in front of it, you can see that silhouette walking in front of it and be a kind of a security place in a way. So it has that role. And yeah, any other questions about it? Yeah.
Go ahead. What is this thing I don't know, maybe a student did Einstein up there. Einstein takes so much away from the beauty of that. Isn't there a better place for Einstein?
Well, that's not within my authority. But if it were, I would change it. I did recommend that it be changed. My influence is waning here, so.
I thought it might have been a student thing, you know, I'm not, but
I'm not sure.
Something with.
I'm not sure what it was, but I understood they had a visiting artist in residence that these are called minute paintings. They're done within minutes, and that's apparently impressive to kids that see that being done. It is in contrast to something that took years, and I guess I wish you weren't there, but it's not within my purview to decide that. I did suggest that it be taken down. Yeah, Melody.
I just have to share this. I wasn't going to, but I am so touched. I was here naturally during the 8 years that everyone was at the wall. The last day, we all had shirts that said, "The wall is done." And it was just a fun thing. We had such respect for it. But there's an animal up there that every time I come into this water calendar. She grew up to be a very nice girl. I still occasionally get on Facebook with her, but she wasn't an athlete. She wasn't a musician. She just didn't have anything. Such a lonely girl. And she was assigned, and I didn't say anything to you, but you assigned her to Kim. To this day, I've been these tears miles. We still, I see her, we talk about Kim. And she has something to live for that is beyond. So all I want to say is there's so much more to this wall than we need to talk about. But that's my favorite spot.
Thank you. Well, we did try to involve kids with less abilities. Again, to pair them with someone, and they got along fine. And I tried to do that so it wasn't obvious that put a pair up there that had a goal and it was a joint thing. It's not unlike when people do a play, everyone acts in concert in presenting that play. The rehearsals are actually more important than the play itself. And the object of people working together that have all these variants in abilities, and they end up liking each other, that formerly maybe didn't like each other, is a nice thing to see. Again, the climate out here is always pleasant. Noisy, but pleasant. For me too, by the way. I kind of like being out here too, with them. But remember, when I say 8 years, I was telling my cousin Carol is here, and Ron, and Carol's friend Carol Krieger is here. Thank you so much for being here, from St. Paul and Newport, White Bear. Nice of them to come on. I'm able to share a little bit of what I did for a living here for them to see as well, so I'm proud about that. Al?
I know for those of us who worked here in that period of time, can you point out the buildings are still standing now on either side? You did part of it.
Yeah, the bank building is right down here, right here. That is still there. They took the sign that said, right here, the Bank of St. Croix Falls, and just this year they defaced that, or not defaced it, but obliterated the lettering. I thought it was too bad they did that because it was a time. This bank did fail in 1929, and I don't know whether this bank did or not, but that building is still there. Clayton's Hardware building is right here. This building is still there. I'm not sure about this one, but this again is the Swanson office. This is not there now. But again, wedding the plat map to the photos that Grand Landing shared with us, we were able to really put a fine edge on that. But here again, we took some license. The light posts that you see in the painting are the inspiration for the lights that are downtown right now. The city planner had come up here to look at the mural, so they patterned the configuration of the streetlights. They're not as beautiful as these would have been. In fact, they're kind of the cheap seats, I think, downtown. But the inspiration for the shape was born from the mural, so it was life imitating art. So that's what that's about. Any other questions?
I just wanted to mention with Joanna and I raising our 5 kids here, we had considerable time spent with Mitch McQuaid and Damon Schmidt.
Yeah.
And we've heard them speak in detail with great pride about their involvement on this and about you.
I think Damon did some bricks too that he wasn't happy about. It is a source of pride for the community, and I guess I was pleased that it became, people would give me too much credit. I would say, well, of course I wasn't wallpaper here, I worked here and guided with these kids, but it was done by them. I once in a while would show them something, mostly on butcher block paper, before we would carve in the back of that and put it up on the wall. That's what they all called it, the wall. Can I work on the wall? And it was a privilege for them to come out here, and it was really, I think, a pleasant experience, and I hope a lot of them harbor those kind of thoughts. Well, that's my song and dance, unless you have other questions. Melody, did you have something?
No, I usually do, but I don't.
What you could do now, if you want to, and I will be up here in front, come and look at this stuff more closely, the cat and the mouse. All the stuff on the street. There's a lot of detail here that took a lot of time.
Hey, Norm, what's the deal with that portrait of that lady up here in the corner?
Well, that's a Coca-Cola ad, and that particularly part of the architecture, I don't really know why that's encased like that, but we worked with what we had. So here again, Norman, my namesake, did that. It's a Coca-Cola tray from around 1912. And, but you can study the portraits and see the intricacy of some of that. And so I'm pleased at how it turned out. They give me a little too much credit. Yeah.
You say about 1988 Norm started?
Well, it was finished in 96, so in 88. But we really didn't start chronicling until we started working for real. There was a lot of work that went on ahead of even coming out here. And I'm sorry to say, those are the kids I didn't write down because the drama wasn't quite there yet. The drama began to unfold as this whole thing started to take shape.
I just bumped that listed by 8 years, so.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's a good memory for people who work on it. Yeah. Any other questions? I'll be glad to answer anything up here if you want to come up and look at it more closely.